Hi, folks. I'm Imran. Today, I'm going to be talking about how we're using FHIR to enable patients to manage their healthcare and to be able to make good decisions. Also, how we are making FHIR be available to mobile and AI as first-class citizens. And we're making a lot of that technology available as free open source that people can use in their own projects. So a little bit about BeWell. We work with a lot of large companies such as Samsung and Walgreens to enable their consumers to be able to access healthcare and to be able to make good decisions. If you buy a phone in the US from Samsung, our technology is on it. So about over 100 million people have our technology installed on their phones today. Okay, so if you look at the picture in FHIR today, this is kind of what the picture looks like, right? You got providers that put stuff into the electronic medical record that gets stored in a database, and then the task is to get it to the other doctor who is using typically a different EMR in a different database. And a lot of FHIR today is focused on how do we convert the data, as you heard the previous speaker talk about, from the open EHR or whatever the EMR database is into FHIR, get it transmitted on the other side, get it converted back into some other EMR format and go there. So this is where a lot of FHIR is focused today. The patient is kind of left out of this thing. So the patients actually have no idea this is going on. They don't know what is happening here. But if you look at healthcare, typically we are focused a lot on this middle part of healthcare, which on average a person spends about 4 to 12 hours in a whole year interacting with either a doctor or a hospital or pharmacy or lab. That's it. So healthcare is actually about all the other time that you're spending before you're actually seeing a provider and after you see a provider. And today, FHIR is really not focused on that. FHIR is focused on that small sliver of someone's time. And if you look at statistics, I won't go through all of these, but you can see there's actually a really big problem happening outside of that 4 to 12 hours that people are spending with their providers. If you just a few things here, almost half the adults do not actually complete their annual physical exams. And this is actually true across the world, really. It's not just in any part of the country. Similarly, after someone leaves, 30% of prescriptions are actually never picked up. And when people leave hospitals, 70% of patients actually do not follow the discharge instructions after leaving the hospital. So really, there's a big value for FHIR to actually help with all of this time that people are not spending in front of the provider. So that's where we're focused is really a different way to think about this is instead of focusing exclusively on how do we exchange data using FHIR between providers, how about we give patients their own FHIR store? So they can actually aggregate all their data into their own store. They can actually get value out of all this, their own healthcare record that is being kept everywhere else. And then they can actually decide how to exchange data with any provider they're seeing. And this is actually what happens in every other industry in your life. When you buy a car, you buy your car, you drive it anywhere you want, you sell it to anyone you want. You don't go back to your car manufacturer to ask them, can I drive the car over there or not? Can I sell it to that guy? Can you go sell it to that guy? So to enable that, what we're doing is really building this consumer FHIR store. And then on top of that, we build a mobile app that can be used, actually an SDK that can be used by any mobile app to access all this data that the patient is actually aggregating now. And the patients can themselves figure out using CQL what care gaps they have so they can go address their care gaps by making appointments. We're enabling AI so a patient can actually use all of this FHIR data that they have and actually be able to ask questions and get summaries to take to the doctor and be prepared for what questions they're going to ask their doctors. And then they're in charge of transferring the records. So then talking about what are all the technology we had to build around FHIR to enable all this, to really take FHIR from the provider sliver I talked about into all of the 99.9% of the time that you're spending not in front of the provider. So the first thing we had to build was the consumer FHIR store. So this is where consumers actually store all their FHIR data that exists in all of the different places that they interact with, whether that's a doctor, whether that's a hospital, whether that's a pharmacy, whether that's a lab, or whether that's data they're collecting themselves through the devices they have in their own home. And then what we found was really the FHIR data out there is actually not very clean, and actually requiring everyone to clean the same data again and again doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You want more of the oil refinery model where there's a refinery that cleans it. Not every gas station has to clean their own oil. So we built a lot of the routines already to clean and add standard codes and values into the data, so every company doesn't have to go and do all that work again. What we learned during this thing is that the other FHIR servers that we looked at, they're all built for provider-to-provider exchange. There's nothing that's built for millions of patients actually managing their own data and doing that. So we had to go build our own FHIR server for that. And as I mentioned, there's just too much work right now in sort of standardizing and cleaning data. So by providing a layer that automatically does that, really simplifies the deployment across many customers. Number two is really mobile phone. Where do you do most of your work these days? It's on your mobile phone. That's where you spend time. Today, the mobile phone is really not very well integrated with FHIR. So what we've built is a way to integrate mobile phones directly with FHIR. We have an SDK that's available to any app developer that they can just drop into their app, whether it's an Android phone or an Apple phone, and they can now work in FHIR. And that's, as I mentioned, is deployed on over 50 million phones already. And what we learned here is really that mobile apps are not part of the FHIR ecosystem. And then there's an issue around FHIR size, because FHIR tends to be pretty big, but using GraphQL and compression, you can actually get that to go over cellular networks in a reasonable way. And then care gaps. Today, care gaps are all determined by providers. Why can't patients figure out what their own care gaps are and go make appointments when they need to make appointments? And so we took the CQL standard and the CQL engines, and we've integrated that directly into the consumer flows, so they get a push notification on their mobile apps when there's something for them to do. Get a flu vaccine, get a COVID vaccine, get an annual physical exam, get a foot exam. Just shows up on your phone today, just like anything from social media shows up on your phone today. And then the record transfer. So again, instead of the record transfer being provider to provider, we've made it provider to patient to provider. So that way patients can maintain their records, and they can, wherever they go, they can provide their records to wherever they go. And what we found is really their problems with the provider to provider exchange aren't just technical, they are very non-technical, because providers can compete with each other. It's not a big priority for them to share records because they may lose their patient. And so by taking that choice out of the hands of providers and putting it in the hands of the patients, you get really a much better flow of FHIR data across the ecosystem. And patients do want to own their healthcare data. Today you own your banking data. Today you own your Amazon data. Why can't you own your healthcare data? And finally, the AI. Why can't we make AI be a first-class citizen to FHIR? And so that's what we're doing with the Health Copilot, is we're building technology that enables consumers to ask their own questions. As you can see on the right-hand side, you're saying, using my vaccine history, which is all the FHIR data you have, and my age, and CDC is the US organization that determines vaccination, tell me what vaccination do I need right now? And whoever has kids, you probably know it's so hard for you to remember what vaccinations your kids need at what age. With AI, we can make that really, really simple. And we're using the International Patient Summary with some modifications we've made as the input to the LLM, so the LLMs can now understand FHIR and records in a much easier way than pushing the whole FHIR to them. So going back to the diagram, so this is kind of what we talked about, is a model of where consumers can keep their own FHIR data in the store from all the various places that it exists. They own it now. It's in their control. And they, through a mobile app, they can actually find out what is happening in their healthcare, their family's healthcare. A lot of people are taking care of their older parents or their kids, even when they've moved away from your house. So being able to do all that through the mobile app, which is really the first screen that everyone uses today. Pushing the care gaps directly to your mobile phone, just like social media alerts show up on your mobile phone. So it's really very easy for you to figure out what is it that you need to do, rather than waiting for a provider to tell you in that 0.01% of the time that you actually spend with a provider. The making AI a first-class citizen on FHIR. So I'll talk about next. We built technology that really connects AI to FHIR very natively, so that people can use FHIR as inputs to AI. And the record transfer, so having patients be in charge of their data and being able to transfer their records to whoever they're seeing, rather than expect some other transfer to happen somewhere behind the scenes. So to enable all this, we believe that open source helps the whole FHIR community. So as we built this platform over 5 to 10 years, we built a lot of technology that we're making available as free open source to the community, that the community can use to develop their own solutions. So as I mentioned, we built a FHIR server that handles hundreds of millions of patient records, and you can connect to it directly from your mobile phone. And permissions, we're using the FHIR consent resource to manage permissions. So instead of you building a proxy layer on top, the FHIR server already understands all your consents and will actually manage the permissions for you for whatever entity is sharing it. So you don't have to go implement a different rules engine to put permissions on top of it. It has real-time streaming, so you can actually stream millions of records down and stream millions of records up. You don't have to separate that into pages and things like that. And as I mentioned, the direct mobile access allows you to actually make mobile a first-class citizen of FHIR rather than an afterthought on FHIR. On top of that, on the analyze side, we built a FHIR catalog UI. So you guys all probably use Amazon to explore products. We built that same kind of experience on top of FHIR. So you can use a catalog like Amazon to explore FHIR data. One of the things I think you guys have heard in the conference is, most people do not understand FHIR, they understand spreadsheets. So we've actually built technology that converts FHIR to a spreadsheet format that most people can just look at and understand that data without understanding all the nested hierarchy of FHIR. And then when you talk about processing the data or analyzing this data, the number one technology that's out there to analyze large amounts of data is Apache Spark, right? So why build another technology to analyze FHIR data when Apache Spark can handle this? So what we built is really technology that connects Apache Spark to FHIR. So you can actually use Apache Spark to analyze FHIR data, to process FHIR data. So you get the benefit of the whole ecosystem of Apache Spark and the ability to distribute and process large amounts of data very, very quickly to be able to do that with FHIR rather than go build something else to do that for FHIR. And then one of the things that we're working on releasing very soon is basically an LLM interface to FHIR. So you can actually go into the LLM and you can ask questions about your FHIR data, and all the integrations are already there, so you don't have to connect that together. Because FHIR is the data that, through our work with IPS and others, is data that LLMs can actually understand really well. On top of that, on the build side, so we built a SDK for Python that makes FHIR very, very easy to use at scale. So you can just drop that in your Python project, and you can now access large amounts of FHIR data and handle that. One of the things, as you're starting to deal with FHIR data, one of the problems with FHIR data is that it's pretty big. So we built this technology that's a Python library you can drop in that will keep your FHIR compressed in memory. So that means you can process, we get about a 1:100 compression ratio on FHIR. So that means that you can process a lot more data in memory, which is much faster than reading from disk all the time. And it keeps it all compressed. When you access it, it will decompress it on the fly and will compress it again once you're done with it. So that allows us to process a lot more FHIR data in memory in really any Python code than reading the normal FHIR and storing it as dictionaries, which is what most people do. And then we are going to be releasing an AI agent for FHIR. So this is an agent that knows how to talk to FHIR servers. So you can just include that as an agent to your AI solutions, and it will actually understand how to get the FHIR data. It will understand how to summarize the FHIR data for you. It will understand how to generate questions and validate the FHIR data for you. So instead of everyone building their own way of validating things, and own way of accessing the FHIR servers to AI, this agent is just something you can connect to your any LLM that you have, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, and now your LLM can access your FHIR data. So it's just a plug-and-play way for you to get going. And then finally, the patient summary. So we're big fans of patient summaries. As I mentioned, a very good use case is when you go see a doctor, you want to bring your summary with you, rather than have that 5 minutes of explaining what happened to you since you showed up. And so we're going to be releasing an open source component that just automatically generates the patient summary out of a bundle of FHIR resources that a patient has. So these are things that are available now or are coming very soon. We think that by building these components from what we've learned, it enables everyone to really start to use FHIR as a first-class citizen for mobile, for AI, for direct to patient. So that's really it. If you guys want to know more, you can, on my LinkedIn page, I talk about a lot of these topics a lot. I talked about how LLMs really work very well with FHIR data, as long as you can format it the right way. Then they can answer a lot of questions. We talk about what's available in the Samsung phones now through our technology of identifying care gaps. And we also talk about AI and FHIR together, such as how we are doing MCP on top of FHIR. I'll stop there. Questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. This sounds like it will be a great patient enabler. So I look forward to your progress in this. One of the questions I had is, how do you get the EHR vendors and specifically to unlock their data, or even private practitioners in, if like I have 3 different EHRs, it's the same vendor, it just so happens. So how do you get them all to unlock their data for you? Do you do that? Do you intermediate for us? And as well as normalization, each EHR has their own local codes. How do you transform them? So there's a lot of questions behind that.
No, I think good question. So we've spent about 5 years building all those connections to all the EMRs, because we think that waiting for all the EMRs to work with each other is probably going to be a long time to happen. Same with expecting people to unify terminologies. We think it's going to take a long time to happen. So we think the solution is to centralize those transformations. So we've actually invested a lot of money and built a lot of that to normalize a lot of the terminologies between. So for example, when you get FHIR data from us, you can be guaranteed that it will have a line code on it, regardless of what codes it came with. You can be guaranteed that it will have an ICD-10 code on it, regardless of whether it came with a SNOMED code or whatever. So by standardizing those, we make the FHIR data much easier to handle, because you don't have to deal with, okay, I have an observation. Does it have a line code? Does it have a CPT code? Does it have that? Those things have all been standardized through our central layer. And that's what we believe unlocks the FHIR data for a lot more use cases, because not everyone has the capacity to invest in all the terminology conversions.
I've just seen that the EHR vendors, a couple in particular, they use local code system. How do you, in every instance is its own local code system. How do you reconcile those? Yeah. And the other thing is, as data updates, so patient goes for another visit, now you've got updated data you've got to deal with as well.
Yeah, so for the first one, we're using AI to actually map terminologies. So that way, even if someone's using local codes, we can take an example of if you have a lab result. We can look at the data that's sitting on that lab result, such as the codes, the ranges, the values. So even if there isn't a code or it's a local code, the rest of the information, our AI models can figure out what that actually is talking about, since we have so much data that we can train AI on.
Thank you, Imran. So my question is around self-reported observations. As you're going through the care gaps, is there any facility within this BeWell platform for patients, say on the day they give their weight changes or their difference in blood pressure measurements to what was reported in hospital? Does that get accounted for in those care gaps, or is it purely the data that comes from hospital systems?
It's definitely we believe patient-reported data is a really, really important factor. If you look at medications, for example, so providers do the medication reconciliation, but if you've ever interacted with it, most of the time it's wrong, because when the patient's there, they don't remember all the medications they're taking. They actually remember it at home, right? When they have the bag of medications that they open up, and that's all the medications. So by allowing patients to submit their data, we think is a better solution. Similarly, like before showing up to the doctor's appointment, you can get all that information collected and then come to the doctor with the patient summary that says, these are the medications I'm on. rather than the doctor asking you, what medications are you taking? And you have no idea what medications you're taking. Anytime someone's on 5 medications or more, it's highly unlikely that they will remember what medications they're taking. So
Okay.
we think that's a really big use case of getting patients to interact with it and say, this data is not correct. I did get a colonoscopy. You keep telling me I didn't. I did get a colonoscopy. Here's the record. Right?
Okay, we have time for one final quick question. And don't forget that you can also post your questions in the Whoova app.
Can you just speak a little more to why IPS was so useful with LLMs?
Yeah, so if you think about what kind of questions you're typically asking the LLM, you're asking it about your health record, right? And so FHIR is really great, but it's very deep, right? It captures a lot more than what you would consider a typical health record the doctor would look at, right? It has a lot of detail in there. And so the challenge was, okay, how do you create that kind of view that the doctor would look at? Because the LLM should look at the same kind of data that a doctor would look at, right? And so to do that, the International Patient Summary seemed like a very good way of doing that, because it is summarizing the information about a patient. And the goal of IPS is, so if you go to a new doctor, how can they understand what your health record very quickly? So by doing that, and then we take it through a conversion to get it into a textual format that the LLM likes, because the IPS is not exactly what the LLM likes, but you can transform it into a textual format that the LLM really understands. And that's the solution we use.
Okay, I think this closes up the session. Thank you very much, Imran. Give another big round of applause.
Thank you.